As Kavanaugh had said, as I pointed out, the quote from Friday was, well, I think it's a very unusual situation that hospitals and healthcare organizations affected by the regulation are not here complaining, but the rule instead support what is happening. So what are we to make of that, he said. Well, I'll tell you what you make out of that. What you realize is that Kavanaugh is one of these corporate fascists who talks about stakeholders. He doesn't care about individual liberty. He doesn't care about the hoi polloi. This is just about what the people who own things care about. You see this all the time. This is a hallmark of the globalist governance, the fact that it is a corporate fascist sense of government where they talk about stakeholders. And again, when they're even crafting this OSHA rule that's now been overturned, what did they do? Did they ask any employees? No. They had some of the big companies come in and talk to OSHA behind closed doors, and they worked out the fact that the big companies would get behind this as long as they didn't force the big companies to pay for testing. And that was what they came up with. So these are some of the comments that people put on Twitter. I'm credibly accusing Kavanaugh of raping the Constitution and the rights of all healthcare workers today by voting for such an abusive mandate. Because again, remember the contentious hearings where there are charges of sexual assault? Well, now we know that he's raped the Constitution. He's raped and ripped it in half. Another person said, never call those men conservatives again. Kavanaugh and Roberts just sided with Breyer, Sotomayor, Kagan to force 17 million healthcare workers to get a so-called vaccine. Another one. Kavanaugh is no friend of small government or conservatives. Nationalized industry and centrally planned health care is what he's for. And that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say it's stakeholder, a stakeholder orientation. We will work for these multinational corporations, the people who own everything, and for the central government that works hand in glove with them. But as far as the medical workers, we don't care about that whatsoever. Roberts and Kavanaugh join the liberals, a 5-4 majority. The mandate covers virtually all healthcare workers in the country, applying to providers that receive Medicare, Medicaid. It affects 10.4 million workers. Some people say more. It affects 76,000 healthcare facilities as well as home healthcare providers. Although, and here's an important thing, if you are a nurse or a healthcare worker, you still have as part of this rule medical and religious exemptions. Medical and religious exemptions are there. This is what the liberals said in the opinion, which, by the way, they didn't sign. Isn't that interesting? You write an opinion to force people to get an experimental jab that hasn't been authorized, a jab that these medical workers know is harmful. You're so ashamed of it that you don't want to sign it? Is that what's going on here? This is what the unsigned opinion said from the court. The challenges posed by a global pandemic do not allow a federal agency to exercise power that Congress has not conferred upon it. Well, that starts to sound right, doesn't it? I mean, that's right. You don't suspend the rule of law with an emergency. Everybody to leave the building unless you were jabbed. At the same time, they said, however, but these are unprecedented circumstances, and they provide no grounds for limiting the exercise of authorities the agency has long been recognized to have. Oh, wow. Clarence Thomas disagreed. He said in a dissenting statement, he said, this case is about whether the administration has the authority to force healthcare workers by coercing their employers to undergo a medical procedure they do not want and that they cannot undo. See, Clarence Thomas looked at it from the individual's perspective. When Clarence Thomas looks at this, he looks at it from the standpoint not of Kavanaugh. He said this is about coercing workers to undergo a medical procedure that they do not want and cannot undo. The liberals, on the other hand, are saying, well, we shouldn't, just because we've got a pandemic doesn't mean that any federal agency can do what they want, except that this is so important and so different that, yes, we will let any federal agency do whatever they wish. Justices Alito, Gorsuch, and Barrett signed on to Thomas's opinion. Isn't that interesting? The people who said you're going to have the mandate did not sign their opinion, but the people who opposed it did. Yeah. If you're not ashamed of what you're doing, you can put your John Hancock on there, and you can do it really big, can't you? That's what Hancock was known for. Decisions by federal appeals courts in New Orleans and St. Louis had blocked the mandate, and that applied to about half of the states. This is, again, they were looking at it from a legal standpoint. Thomas blasted the CMS mandate in a dissent that was joined by the other three, Alito, Barrett, Gorsuch. He said the government proposes to find virtually unlimited vaccination power over millions of healthcare workers. Had Congress wanted to grant CMS power to impose a vaccine mandate, it would have clearly said so, and it did not. He added that the administration has not made a strong showing that Congress gave CMS that broad authority. But of course, Biden had already said, well, this is not about freedom. This is not about personal choice. This is about protecting everybody, making sure you're safe. In other words, this is about obeying my unlawful dictates. Let me just say this, though. Where the conservatives fail is in the ratcheting effect. The 10th Amendment says, if you do not have these powers specifically delegated to you by the states and by the people, then you don't have them. Now, what Clarence Thomas and the conservatives are saying is that OSHA, and in the case where they lost because of the backstabbing of Kavanaugh and Roberts, what they're saying is these bureaucracies don't have that power because it wasn't specifically given to them by Congress. Do you see how we're sliding down into the abyss? The Constitution says the federal government doesn't have powers that are not specifically given to it, but the conservatives are saying if the Congress can give you any power it wants, right? See, that's the fatal error that underlies all this. It goes back quite some time. Their understanding and what they're trying to tell you is, well, the federal government can do anything it wants, but it has to be done by the Senate. They have to delegate that power to the bureaucracy. No, they can't delegate things to the bureaucracy, powers to the federal bureaucracy that the federal government doesn't have in the first place. And there is some hope on the horizon on the legal front, and that is this case that is still percolating. It's not finished. And I'm going to tell you why it's not finished, and that is the one that looks at the so-called approval of the Pfizer shot. Because, folks, if this has not been approved, if it's still under emergency use authorization, there isn't any entity, private or public, that can force people to do this. That is the essence of this thing that shows that the emperor has no clothes. This case that continues to unfold. U.S. Federal District Court, Northern District of Florida, U.S. Federal District Judge Alan Windsor, on January the 6th, an update to this case about what was really approved by the FDA. And if we really do have an approved vaccine that is available to anybody in the United States, or do we only have something that is approved as an emergency use, that only has emergency use authorization? And if it has only emergency authorization, it cannot be required by anybody, public or private. And that includes the military. And that's what this case was about. This judge, Judge Windsor, denied a motion by the U.S. Department of Defense for a stay of discovery and evidence in an ongoing court case regarding the military mandates. And so this was on January the 6th. Now understand, it was just a few days before that you had on January the 3rd, 3 days earlier, you had a federal judge that ruled in favor of the Navy SEALs who were challenging the Pentagon, trying to take away their religious exemption, right? So this judge had made his decision a few months earlier and said, you're saying, the FDA is saying, the Pentagon is saying, that Comirnaty and the Pfizer EUA vaccines are legally distinct. Define that for me. Well, and they wouldn't say anything. And he goes, all right, you said that they're legally distinct, so they're not the same thing. And so you don't have anything that's available here in the United States. Do you have this? Do you have the Comirnaty in the U.S.? No, we don't have it. And so you're telling me that you think that this Comirnaty approval applies to these other labeled drugs. Well, I don't buy that. he said. And furthermore, it has even more problems because under federal regulations, they say that if there is an approved drug somewhere, so in other words, if they say that Comirnaty, which is sold in Europe, is approved, then that takes away the emergency use authorization of a drug used for the same thing. So that would take away the only thing that is available in the United States. And so in this previous case by Windsor, he did not put out an injunction, which was put out by this judge over the First Amendment violations of the Navy SEALs. So he says, you're violating their First Amendment religious exemptions, and I'm putting an injunction on this to stop it. He does that on January the 3rd. This other judge who just wrote this railing decision about the legal games and prevarication of the FDA, talking about Comirnaty versus the Pfizer EUA, he just ripped them for that, but he wouldn't put out an injunction. And so I think when he sees more of these cases, and when he saw this other judge who put an injunction out there, the Department of Defense, even as he ruled in favor of what was there but did not put an injunction, the Department of Defense tried to stop any further discovery. And this judge just now has been a little bit more bold and said, no, I'm going to allow them to look at the records. Now, what might happen when they look at the records? Well, as children'shealthdefense.org points out, the judge's ruling allowing the discovery phase to continue is significant, as during this process, evidence indicating potential federal government and military wrongdoing may be uncovered. This may include records that indicate the various branches of the military have violated DoD official policy by requiring the administration of an emergency authorized vaccine as opposed to a fully approved vaccine. This could be very big. And it could be very big not just for people who are in the military, not just for federal employees, but it could be big for anybody, anywhere, where the government is trying to force them, trying to blackmail them into taking these genetic code injections. Judge Windsor referenced the service member's initial request for preliminary injunction, which he had rejected, partly on the basis that the service members had not shown that they had been denied a FDA-approved vaccine. He rebuffed the DoD's claim, however, that the Pfizer vaccine, released under the emergency use authorization, is, quote, interchangeable with the Pfizer Comirnaty vaccine that received full FDA approval. He said, no, the FDA says it's legally distinct. It is legally distinct. And if you don't have the one that's been approved, Comirnaty, then you don't have approval. The plaintiff subsequently filed an amended complaint in which some of the plaintiffs alleged that, in fact, they were denied the FDA-approved Pfizer Comirnaty vaccine. Has your news been censored, banned over and over again? Has vital information been held prisoner by mainstream and anti-social media? It's the duty of every thinking person to make the great escape to thedavidknightshow.com. There you'll find links to live streams, videos, audio podcasts, and support links. Live stream the show at DLive and every Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern. Videos at BitChute and YouTube. New audio podcast, The Real David Knight Show, at Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeart, Spotify, and more. But even though there's a light at the end of the tunnel, without your support, the show will run out of gas. The links to support the show are at thedavidknightshow.com to donate via Subscribestar, donate via or donate via Cash App, Bitcoin, or P.O. Box. Our sincere thanks to all of you who have stood with us to get this far. Please don't forget to share the links and pray for the country as well as our family.